All right, everyone, we are ready. I've been asked to remind everyone to speak directly into their microphones. I apologize to the public and to the people who might be watching us on the television. We are having issues with our microphones. We've tried to have them repaired, and they're still trying to figure out the problem. So if we cut in and out, I apologize. We'll do our best to speak directly into them, and you can hear us. So I'll call to order the regular meeting of the Common Council of the City of Platteville for Tuesday, November 28th, 2017, and we'll start with roll call.
Tom Nall.
Here.
Catherine Westaby. Here. Barbara Doss.
Here.
Don Francis.
Here.
Barbara Stockhausen.
Here.
Ken Killian.
Here.
Eileen Nichols.
Here. All right, the first item this evening on our agenda is a public hearing for the 2018 budget.
Council members and members of the public, it's good to see a big crowd here. I'm sure you guys are all very interested in the budget. What I'd like to do tonight is to run through the presentation, the public presentation that we intended to do last week. I'm going to move through it very quickly, though, so we will have this posted on our website, so if anyone wants to go back and refer to any of the slides, they certainly should do that. And I do want to mention that this budget is the culmination of many weeks of work, starting with staff, and particularly our finance manager and finance director, all of our department heads, and the council themselves through a series of workshops that has brought us to this point.
I should say that the presentation is in the back of the room. I want to follow along with the slides.
Still not working? Not working.
Jody's gonna have to.
All right, so Jody's going to be Vanna tonight. And Jody, if you just want to forward to the slide that says sustainability bond rater. And I'm not actually going to read through these slides verbatim. We've talked a lot over the last 12 to 18 months about the concept of a sustainable budget and what it means to have a sustainable budget. And that's really been a project that we've been working on. Outlined here are some of the things that bond raters look at when they're looking at a community. On the next slide, there's also a series of criteria that city managers are particularly focused on. And really wanting to make sure that we have appropriate contingencies, that we're able to set aside enough money for our capital needs, and that we're able to pay market competitive wage rates to be able to attract talent. So we are in an era of challenging trade-offs. We're primarily a service-based organization. We have to be able to provide the compensation and benefits for our staff. We maintain a lot of infrastructure as a city. We have a lot of roads. We have associated equipment to take care of those, park and recreation equipment that we have to maintain. And then at the same time, we're always trying to carve out a piece of our budget to be able to do new things to advance our community. So of the tax revenue that we get, only about 44% actually goes into the general fund that's used for our operating expenses. The remainder is paying for expenses associated with tax increment districts, or about 23% is going to our debt service. So as we approached 2017, we knew that we had some significant challenges. And again, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about this, but we were facing a significant shortfall of almost $200,000 in our general fund. And we also had a TID district that was short as well. And as we looked at that, we knew that that was a multiple year scenario. So it wasn't just a 1 year situation. And it was primarily due to our debt structure and the fact that our debt payments had been, I'm going to call it backloaded, meaning that they were escalating over time. So next year, just to put that in perspective, One more. One more, Jody. Okay, just to put that in perspective, a 1% increase in property taxes nets about $40,000 to the general fund. So we knew we really had to make some difficult choices that involved both increasing revenue and decreasing expenses. And so last year, we had a 5% increase in our levy. We implemented an ambulance fee and a motor vehicle registration fee to go towards the revenue side. Then on the expense side, we also had some reductions that were planned out for 2017 and some additional reductions planned for 2018 because we wanted to give our organizations time to be able to implement those changes. And so now I want to just kind of catch you up with where we're at here in 2018. And most notably, we've got some new financial tools that are hopefully going to help us moving forward so we don't find ourselves in this situation again. One is our new budget, of course, which won the GFOA award for Distinguished Budget. And then more importantly, our long-range financial plan, which is something the council and staff worked on over the course of last winter and spring. And so one of the most significant things we've done was in relationship to that long-range financial plan and restructuring our debt. So before, you can see from this graph, it's a little hard to read on the screen, but over the course of 5 years, our debt service was going to increase about $585,000. And that was without adding any new debt. And then keep in mind, of course, that 1% tax increase equals $40,000. So we restructured our debt through advanced refunding. And so now after that, you can see that our debt schedule for the next 5 years will be increasing about $75,000, which again is going to be much more manageable for us moving forward. The Rountree Gallery used to be a city organization that has now shifted off to being its own nonprofit. We are partnering with them in terms of exhibit space in the library and providing them some office space in City Hall. They do have some trust monies that we are still holding for them as they sort of plan their course moving forward. The Senior Center, and this was a big area of concern, I know, for the community, and I think that we've had some very dedicated community members step forward and really make some very exciting changes. The Senior Center has relocated to O.E. Gray School. This group of citizens have committed to covering the expenses associated with that building, and they've already raised $23,000. We were also successful in getting a grant from the Eckstein Foundation for $15,000. And lastly, the museum was the other area that saw a significant reduction. And in response to that, the museum's gone through a long-range planning process themselves. They're working at adjusting their hours and staffing and kind of shifting their model. They were successful in getting a grant for collections care, and they have raised about $43,000 towards their $50,000 goal for this year. So now on to the 2018 proposed budget. We're continuing through with the council themes that were identified in the 3-year strategic plan that was done last year. Those themes are business, marketing, connections, housing, employee relations, and fiscal sustainability. One thing that you won't see in the budget is actually funds for a housing study, and that's because we intend to fund that through working with our partners and also some funds that we have in their 2017 budget. But that will be an important objective for us next year. So with respect to the budget, the most significant change is really related to employee compensation. Last year, our employees had no wage increase. This year, we are adjusting our ranges by 1%, and employees would move to the next highest step on our the compensation plan that we adopted in 2016, I believe. And you will note that our overall headcount has reduced as a result of us eliminating positions as a result of the 2017 budget. With respect to our general fund revenue, only about 32% of that comes from property taxes. We are very reliant on revenue from the state, and that is actually one of the tricky things about our budget is that depending on the situation with the state budget, it can have a dramatic impact on our budget. With respect to expenses, about 40% is going towards public safety, close to 20% public works, about 20% culture, recreation, with the remainder going to other city functions. So one of the biggest items that is included in the budget is our capital improvement plan. And a capital improvement plan has to deal with projects that are more than $10,000 and are one-time in nature as opposed to an ongoing operating expense. Our proposed budget honors the city's financial policy of limiting our debt to 3.5% of the city's equalized valuation. And you can see that we are at 92% of our internal debt cap that we've placed on ourselves. We are at about 65% of the state's debt cap. And with the parameters of our new long-range financial plan, we will only be taking on long-term debt that matches the debt that's being retired for that year. And now for our proposed CIP, starting with our infrastructure projects, you can see that there are 3 columns there. The first one is tax levy. That means that property tax dollars are going towards that project. And then we've got debt bond, which means that's money that's being borrowed, and then other. Other could be money that's coming from grants. It could be money that's coming from trust funds. It could be park impact fees or other things of that nature. So next year we have 2 significant airport projects that are planned that would be primarily funded through grants and airport fees. 3 street projects, Pine Street, Virgin, and Lutheran Street. The replacement of the Mineral Street parking lot, Legion Field parking lot, Hillside Cemetery Street, and then first phase of Prairie View Soccer. On the next page, you can see the equipment. This is primarily funded through tax levy. We had a lot of deferred equipment needs from last year. So you can see the list there. And then lastly, we have some other projects. Some of them are items that we do tend to do every year: sidewalk repair, street overlays, and highway striping. We also have a small amount of money set aside for park signs, something called the Art Hall Challenge. The Art Hall is the building in Legion Field Park. Did I get that right? And we're actually putting a community challenge out there similar to the Rountree Branch Trail, where we would put $50,000 and see if there's a group that's willing to fundraise for the remainder of that. Pickleball courts, that would be also a fundraising effort. City Hall interior remodel work, and then some exterior stonework that also needs to be done on City Hall. So when you look at CIP funding, as I mentioned before, in accordance with our long-range financial plan, we would only be taking on the amount of debt that's dropping off. Our financial policy requires that we maintain 20% of our unassigned general fund balance. That's something our bond raters look at very closely when they are assigned our bond rating. And actually, the current budget has a higher amount that's being unassigned at 25.5%. The other thing I would note about this is that of our $5 million budget, we've got about $1.2 million that's being borrowed, about $400,000 that's coming from the tax levy, and the remainder is coming from those other sources that I mentioned: grants, fees, park impact fees, things of that nature. So I think we're continuing to do what the council's asked us to do, which is to leverage our dollars to get more done. And this next slide sort of shows that in greater detail, again, showing that in this scenario, grants actually takes up almost 50% of this pie. And that's primarily because of those 2 large airport projects. And this slide just highlights again kind of where we're at with respect to our debt cap and overall debt. We're expecting our debt to level off as well as our debt payments, and then it will gradually decrease. So in terms of the impact on taxes, the actual levy that we're requesting is 2.5% increase from 2017. We're one of 5 taxing jurisdictions on a residence tax bill. I'll go on to the next slide that actually shows and this actually shows the different taxing jurisdictions. So as I said before, Platteville is 2.5%. From this entire list, because some of the jurisdictions are going down and the state of Wisconsin actually is not putting anything on the property tax bill, the net overall impact to a Platteville household is 0.6%. And that's largely because we are only roughly a third of an individual's tax bill. In terms of the actual mill rate, a mill rate represents $1 of tax assessment per 1,000 of assessed property value. Our mill rate would now be 0.0081, which means for every $100,000 in value, a resident would pay $813 a year for the city's portion. The mill rate is actually only going up 2.16% because of growth in our tax base. So again, the levy is increasing by 2.5. The mill rate will only go up by 2.16 because of growth in the tax base. And then when you combine that with all the other taxing jurisdictions, the net result on the tax bill for a resident in our community would be 0.6. And this just shows actually what it would mean in terms of increase. It'd be roughly $17 for the city's portion on a $100,000 tax bill. But when you net that out, it would be less because of other taxing jurisdictions going down. We actually look at equalized value and we make comparisons between communities, and that's because equalized value takes into account whether or not that community is fully assessing with respect to the property values. It represents the best apples to apples comparison. And so if you look on the next slide, you can see that in terms of equalized value, Platteville compares very favorably. I would note, though, that this is only through 2016, payable in 2017, because that's the most recent data that we have. And one of the reasons why this number is so much lower than the actual mill rate is because of the issue of underassessment, which is why we're going through that revaluation process as mandated by the state. And then lastly, just a reminder that taxes are due on January 31st or can be paid in 2 installments. And if you want more information on that, you can certainly talk with our finance department. And with that, I can take any general questions. Otherwise, I'll have Nicola talk about just some specific adjustments that have been made on the final budget with respect to the budget that you previously saw.
Questions, anyone?
All right, so
So in your packet, you have a staff report which explains the change from the published budget to the budget that is being proposed for adoption tonight. And those changes are typical of any year. We publish the budget a few weeks prior to the public hearing, and so then there's other things that can come up which we want to capture in the budget because if we find out about them, we want to make sure that our budget is as accurate as possible. So just to walk through those, the revenue, the general fund revenues increased a little bit due to a correction of a revenue account and then an adjustment to the Friedenreich Animal Care Trust Fund budget. So that total was $2,520 of adjustment to increase general fund revenues. And general fund expenses, first we had a decrease in what was originally budgeted. That decrease was $8,391, and that was due to the city switching our dental insurance, which generated savings. There was an assumption that was made in the budgeting process as to how much our dental premiums would increase, but because of that switch, we did not see that increase, so we were able to decrease general fund expenses for $8,391. There were some other adjustments to the budget assumptions for staffing, and those included a new hire, a retirement, a wage adjustment, and a restructure of the seasonal help in streets and parks, and a correction to the water sewer allocation. And the net of those adjustments caused an increase in expenses of $8,729. That Freudenreich Fund budget also increased expenses by $65. And then we had when we originally budgeted, we had put an amount in the range of $44,000, I think it was, in in one line of contingency, but historically that was split into two lines, and a portion of that, 20,000, was in the wage fringe contingency, and then the remainder was in just standard contingency. And so what we did was just move that 20,000 from contingency to the wage fringe contingency. And also, as part of the seasonal help restructure in streets and parks, there was also a small equipment purchase that's anticipated along with that. So to cover that, the 10,000 was moved from contingency to parks outlay. And so finally, all of those amounts adjust to the contingency, resulting in a decrease to the contingency overall of $27,883. If you would like to see that reflected on the detailed budget page, you can turn to that in your packet if you find that helpful. It's a little bit of a process to get there, but if you go through the first detail is revenues. There's 10 pages of revenues, and then you get to the expenses. And at the bottom of page 1 of expenses and at the top of page 2 of expenses, you can see those changes to the contingency reflected there. The other change that was made from the published budget was in TID 7. As we'll be talking about later, the Pioneer Ford development project has been postponed a little bit, and we're going to propose extending that development agreement into 2018. The 2017 budget did include $800,000 of revenue and expenses related to that development project, but those funds will not be expended in 2017, but will now be moved to 2018. And so the total amount, there's 2 payments associated with the development agreement, and the total amount of those payments is the $1.3 million. So this is simply moving $800,000 from 2017 to 2018, and it's in both the revenue and expenses, and it does not affect the tax levy. So with those proposed adjustments, the new general fund revenue and expense budget total is $8,149,095, and the total budget for the city of Platteville is $16,503,983. I'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Council members have any questions? Great, thank you. Hearing none, we will go through the public hearing. The next one would be public statements in favor. Unregistered to speak, but in information, we do have a small green sheet of paper on the table over there that if you'd like to speak on anything that we're discussing this evening, we would like to have you fill that out. That gives me call you up to actually speak. Public statements against. General. Council discussion.
I think we've discussed this a long time.
We've had a lot of meetings. Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
Second.
Second, and we'll vote.
Hall,
Yes.
Westaby,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Francis,
Yes.
Stackhausen,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes.
Nichols.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Common Council action, there are 2 resolutions, 1724.
Do you want them together or?
I don't know, do we need to have them separately?
Let's have them separately.
Yes, and I actually apologize. I wanted to mention also that 1724 is the ranges for 2018, which includes the 1% that was mentioned during the presentation. So those would be 2 separate resolutions. Yes, please.
Separate, please.
I make a motion we adopt Resolution 1723 appropriating the necessary funds for the operation and administration of the city of Platteville for the year 2018.
Second.
Second, and we'll vote.
Hall,
Yes.
Westaby,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Francis,
Yes.
Stockhausen,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes.
Nichols. Motion carries.
Second resolution, please.
I make a motion, we adopt Resolution 1724, authorizing the salaries and rates of pay of the officers and permanent employees, excluding union personnel, library personnel, and the city manager for the year 2018.
Second. Second, and we'll vote.
I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes?
My question is in relation to my bringing up last time about good paying jobs. Are all the jobs listed here good paying jobs?
And I appreciate the fact that you asked that question. I'm not sure that, city manager, if you'd like to respond to that.
I think that's in the definition of what your definition of a good paying. Certainly there are jobs I wish we could pay more, but I do think the jobs reflect the local market.
Department heads have not indicated anything as far as some.
I think the department heads recognize the financial challenges that we've had.
Some of these may not be good paying jobs.
I think that depends on your definition of what a good paying job.
Well, I think that's look at because I brought up about ADIC and listing from doesn't look like a good paying job starts at thank you.
I do have a comment on that. I believe that the wage rates were established through a study that the council did 2 years ago.
Correct.
Correct? Where we paid a consultant to come in and
So at that time, one of the questions that the consultant asked was where you wanted to be relative to the market. Did you want to lead the market? Did you want to be at market? Did you want to lag the market? And the response from the council was that you wanted to be at market. And I do think that our wage rates reflect our market. If the council changed its policy and wanted to lead the market, then that we could certainly do that, but that would take a financial.
I'm just trying to find out. Talk about good paying jobs. What are good?
All right. We have a motion and we'll vote.
Dahl,
Yes.
Westerby,
Yes.
Doss,
yes.
Francis,
Yes.
Stockhausen,
Yes.
Killian, Nichols. Motion carries.
All right. Thank you to the staff for all your hard work. Lots of hours are put in. The next item on our agenda is ordinance 1714, Hills Plan Unit Development. Joe?
Thank you. The developers of the Cedar Hills condominium project have submitted a request to amend the approved plan unit development for that project. When that project was originally approved, it was approved for 16 single-family detached condominium units, 4 of which have been constructed, but they haven't had as much interest in those units as they have desired or what they anticipated. So they're trying to make a change to the development to try to find that sweet spot in the market as far as sale price. And so they think if they can reduce the price of those units a little bit, they'd have a little bit luck selling the units and have some additional interest in that. So to accomplish that, what they're proposing to do is basically combine some of those, instead of having the detached single-family structures, they would combine them to construct duplex condominium units. So they would save some cost in the construction process in doing so. So the result is they're proposing combine some of the lots that would be adjacent to each other, units 6 and 7, 12 and 13, 14 and 15, would essentially be combined and then to allow for construction of a duplex. The other one, unit 4, would be actually a duplex on what would be a single-family lot at this point. So the result would be an increase of 1 additional unit. So instead of having 16 total units, say 17. because of that one additional duplex on a single-family lot. There would still be a few lots that would be remaining that would still be proposed as single-family lots as far as the condominiums. So the result, as I mentioned, would be one additional unit. As this project was discussed, there was one kind of a unrelated item, but it was related as far as the development itself. There was some concern expressed at the Safe Routes Committee meeting about sidewalk connection as part of this development between Main Street and Perry Drive. Part of that sidewalk has been constructed, but it doesn't go all the way to the end. And as part of the original development, there was never a time frame established as far as when that needed to be completed. So staff is recommending that that sidewalk be completed after the units on lots 4 and 5 are completed, so there wouldn't be a conflict with the construction of those units. So we would suggest making that part of the other than that, staff would recommend approval of the request. The Plan Commission also did review this request and also did approval as well. Any questions?
Last time I had a question referred to the owners, and my question was, what's going to be done about soundproofing, like duplexes? For example, living room to living room, master bedroom to master bedroom, lot 4, lots 6 and 7, master bedroom, joining lots 12 and 13, dining room, lot. How is that accomplished? In
Actually,
other words, to me, putting them as duplexes may actually be a downside, a detriment. How do you soundproof when you put buildings together?
and you're playing right into the next item on public hearing, because Joe, if you have nothing further to add, and if no one else has any questions on the council, next would be public statements in favor, and we have the developer registered in favor. If you give your name and your address, please.
I'm Joel Kling, 6739 North Elm Street. Please bear with me, I'm a little under the weather here tonight. Regarding Ken's comment about soundproofing, I'll address it this way, I guess. Basically, over the last 40 years, there's being in this business, there's two major sources of noise. One's vertical and one is horizontal. Vertical noise would be things like children. I shouldn't say things like. One of the primary things, vertical noise, is children running. And probably the second thing is people exercising. Those are the two things that we deal with in terms of vertical noise. Horizontal noise, you know, it's almost non-existent. Back in the day when you had sound systems, big sound systems, boom boxes, and people turn up the bass, that's when you had issues with horizontal noise. They've disappeared. I mean, everybody's got headphones, right? I mean, that's all we see. So we don't have horizontal noise anymore. Now, to answer your question more directly, Ken, common walls in the duplex, there'll be two separate walls with an inch gap between those walls. Inch gap in the middle. So two separate walls, a 1-inch gap in the middle, and then 4 layers of 1/2-inch drywall. That's what will be on common walls, separating one unit from the other unit. Personally, I think it's overkill, but I was outvoted. So that's what we're doing, and that should be sufficient, more than sufficient. Anything else?
Soundboard at all?
And would you step up? To the microphone so that
Do
everyone
you
can hear you.
use soundboard at all?
We don't use soundboard, but we use gypcrete in our flooring, and that's a real solid soundproofer. We use that in all the apartments, and we'll use it here in the duplexes also, Ken.
And the vertical walls, you're using 4 layers of,
4 layers of drywall plus 2 walls with an inch gap between those walls. Yeah. I keep hearing about affordable housing, and that's what this is all about. These duplexes will be less money than a single-family home. And for that reason, we think more affordable for a variety of people in the community. So, yeah. Anything else?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Sorry. On lots, I think it's 4 and 5, you plan on putting in, once they're completed, putting in a sidewalk. Am I correct about that?
Well, I didn't know about that, but that's what I'm told that we need to do. So, yeah, 4 and Joe, can I throw that back at you?
So the original plan that was approved showed a sidewalk connecting Main Street to Perry Drive. Right now it comes in off of Main Street and basically comes in next to Unit 16. Basically ends near that first little cul-de-sac. The original plan then proposed that it would shift to the other side of the street and run adjacent to Units 4 and 5 and then make that connection up to Perry Drive. So that was the location that was originally part of the plan. So that's when we had said, well, it would be logical that when Units 4 and 5 are constructed, then that sidewalk could go in. And there would be an issue with construction equipment damaging the sidewalk if it was done.
Yeah, and you know, I think we're good with that.
So the idea of the sidewalk is not something now, it was something that was part of the original.
Okay. Joel,
Yeah.
what's your expectations of which units you're going to be doing first?
Looking at the map here, probably 4.
4 is the first one?
Probably, as it stands at this moment, anyway. Yeah.
going to build it as speculation, is that correct? Or sell it to somebody and they'll build it?
We'll be the general contractor ourselves, and we'll find folks that want to work with it. Yeah.
But you won't, because you'll look for somebody to occupy the units.
Maybe I misunderstood your question. Look for someone to occupy the units.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah,
to build.
Ken, we're looking at putting up a spec. That's
Okay,
correct.
That's what I'm asking.
Okay.
Other questions for the developer?
No, Joel, I think this is a good plan because I think there's a history of duplexes selling in this community. I mean, there's certainly no doubt that they've sold on the north side of town. Every one that's been built.
Our most recent owner of a home there told me here recently that she wanted to buy a duplex when she moved. She's from out of the area, and she couldn't find anything in the whole community to meet her needs, so she ended up buying one of our single-family condos. But apparently there's a need for this type of thing. So yeah.
Joe, I do have a question about lots 4 and 5 and the sidewalk. I see that lots 4 and 5 are not connected to each other. According to the plat that you gave me, lot 4 is separated from lot 5 by lot 3 that's on Perry Drive.
Correct.
So when this sidewalk issue was put on, I mean, are the owners of these lots aware that, I mean, you can't put a sidewalk on lot 4 and 5 without going through lot 3.
No, actually, the sidewalk, it won't go on either one of those lots. It'll go in the right-of-way of that platted street.
Okay. Okay.
Like just like a public sidewalk and a public street is within the right-of-way.
Okay.
All right,
May
council
I-
have any other questions for the developer?
May I make a
Yes.
quick one here?
Yes.
I apologize that we did not get information from the Community Safe Routes meeting into the packet at the time. Community Safe Routes met last week before Thanksgiving, and they're asking that this be modified slightly regarding that sidewalk connection, asking that the sidewalk connection be installed upon the completion of the buildings on units 4 and 5, or by November 1st, 2019, whichever comes first, because they want a date certain. They recommend a date certain rather than if Lot 4 or Lot 5 continues on for 4 or 5 years before it gets built. They want to make sure that there's a sidewalk in there. Even if it gets destroyed by construction, then it would need to be rebuilt, is the feeling of the Community Safe Routes Committee.
Yeah, so I'm the liaison, and we did bring up that date. Question I was going to bring up that I was change that to maybe by the end of December 31st, 2022, in 5 years, to give a little more time, because December of 2019 is a little aggressive, especially for development. But to make sure the sidewalks are put in, because
I think that would work for us. If you're going to move it back to, what did you say,
2022.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how will that work with the original agreement? Does that still change anything, or?
No, I don't believe that has any issue. I guess my only tweak on that would be whichever comes first, the date or when those units are if they can sell sooner than that, then they can get the sidewalk.
Sure.
Does that have to change the agreement?
That would be, it should be one of the conditions of approval.
Any other questions for the developer?
Thank you.
All right, I have no one registered to speak against, but I will go through the form here. Public statements against, or general discussion. Motion to close the public hearing.
So move.
Second.
Motion and a second, and we'll vote.
Dahl,
Yes.
Westoby,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Francis,
Yes.
Stackhausen,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes.
Nichols.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Common council action for the 5 Cedar Hills Planned Unit Development.
Motion to approve, allow duplex condominiums as proposed, but with the following condition: that the sidewalk connection to Perry Drive of the condominium buildings, or by December 31st, whichever comes first.
Lots 4 and 5.
Lots 4 and 5, yes.
Second.
I second. Okay.
Motion and a second. We'll
Dahl,
Yes.
Westoby,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Francis,
Yes.
Stackhausen,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes.
Nichols.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, that concludes our public hearings. We're going to go on to the rest of the agenda here. Consideration of the consent calendar. The following items may be approved on a single motion and vote due to their routine nature or previous discussion. Please indicate to the council president if you would prefer separate discussion and action. In our packet are council minutes from our November 14th, 2017 regular meeting. Also payment of bills, and we did receive something from clerk this evening with an update on some of the bills. Appointments to boards and commissions, I have none this evening. Licenses, a temporary Class B to Platteville Main Street to sell fermented malt beverages and wine at 55 South Elm Street on November 30th for the Holiday Inn Express open house, and I will note that the public is invited to attend this open house. It's from 4 until 7 p.m. on 30th. Number 2 is temporary Class B to the Rotary Club of Southwest Wisconsin to sell fermented malt beverages and wine at the Platteville Municipal Auditorium at 75 North Bonson Street on December 17th for the Big Secret at City Hall, Hayes Carl Concert. I don't know what that is yet. I'm going to have to find out. And 3 is 1-year and 2-year operator licenses to sell or serve alcohol. And the last one is to cancel our December 26th council meeting. For a motion.
Also move.
Second. Second.
And a second, I will vote.
Hall,
Yes.
Westerby,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Francis,
Yes.
Stackhausen,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes.
Nichols,
Yes.
motion carries.
Next item is citizens' comments, observations, and petitions, if any, and please limit your comments to no more than 5 minutes. We have one person who's registered, Jack Lutke.
Good evening. My name is Jack Ludke. I'm the Executive Director for the Platteville Main Street Program. And I wanted to basically talk about 2 things tonight. First of all, in the holiday spirit and in the fact that we have just completed Thanksgiving, I think it's an appropriate time to thank the city employees and in particular the department heads for the Christmas decorations that get put up every year. I think Main Street is beautiful again this year. They also take care of the placement of the flags as well as the maintenance and the work that we need done in City Park from time to time and keeping the streets clean. So on a year-round basis, we in the Main Street District, the businesses and people that live there are very appreciative of the efforts of the city staff, and we thank you for that. Point 2. Not sure what that is, but it's you. Okay, we'll stop that. The second thing I'd like to mention is an event that's going to take place here in City Hall in this building on this coming Saturday, December 2nd. We are planning our 2nd annual holiday stroll, and at the suggestion of the city manager, since we didn't have a place big enough on Main Street that was vacant right now, she suggested we hold the events for vendor fair in City Hall and utilize the auditorium for some musical presentations as well. So from 10 until 2 on Saturday, we will have 26 vendors located and craftspeople located throughout City Hall. We will have various musical groups performing in the auditorium. On Main Street itself, we will have approximately 12 of the businesses that are going to have specials and things going on within their stores, as well as at the library and at the museum for children. And again this year, we will be visited by Santa and Mrs. Santa, I think, and also the Grinch is coming back for an encore this year. So I see all of the students out here. If you've got nothing better to do on Saturday, come down, come through here, right? Good. And enjoy the activities on Main Street. It'll give you an opportunity to really understand and get a feel for all the friendly businesses and the friendly merchants that will be in City Hall here. And again, we thank the city for allowing us to utilize an activity here in the building. Thank you.
Thank you. Item is reports in our packet. Public Transportation Committee, anything to add, Dawes?
Nope.
Museum Board, Westerby?
Nothing to add.
And Library Board, myself, and I have nothing to add either. So we're going to go on to action items. The first one is Ordinance 1713, renaming Chapter 36. Ann.
This ordinance change is changing the name of the ordinance from intoxicating liquor, fermented malt beverages, and other beverages to alcohol beverages. Deletes the reference to wholesaler's license because it's state issued, and then implements a late fee, and we're $100 for renewal alcohol license applications that are submitted after the application deadline of May 1st. Any questions?
I move to approve ordinance 1713, chapter 36, and amending section 36.06 license fee.
Second.
Motion and a second.
Hall?
Yes.
Westerby?
Yes.
Doss?
Yes.
Francis?
Yes.
Stackhausen?
Yes.
Killian?
Yes.
Nichols?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Next item is contract 1917, snow and ice removal. Howard?
Yes, this is our annual contract for removal of snow and ice on sidewalks where the property owners fail to do so. When we do so, we charge the property owner the actual charge for removal of snow plus a $20 administrative fee. We provided bid packages to 5 firms who have worked with us before. We received 1 bid from Four Seasons Landscaping, $20 per square foot, $40 minimum for snow only, 25 cents per square foot or $50 minimum for hard packed snow or ice removal. This will be the second year of our revised snow enforcement policy, where we put up door hangers on parcels that have not had snow clearing within 24 hours. So I recommend that we award the contract to Four Seasons Landscaping at the aforementioned bid prices.
Questions?
I make a motion we award contract 1917 snow and ice Four Seasons Landscaping, bid price of 20 cents per square foot or $40 minimum for snow only, 25 cents per square foot or $50 minimum for.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. We'll vote.
Hall?
Yes.
Westerby?
Yes.
Doss?
Yes.
Francis?
Yes.
Stackhausen?
Yes.
Killian?
Yes.
Nichols?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Next item is the development agreement amendment for the former Pine Ford property.
Thank you. As part of that approval of the redevelopment project for the former Pioneer Ford properties, we did a development agreement which outlined the terms and conditions of that agreement in the proposed project. The agreement included a tentative timeline on when things would happen as far as that development and the city needed to do as part of that development. The primary issue with that is we're running out of time to complete activities that were identified in that agreement. Specifically, the agreement said the property would be sold or transferred to general capital by the end of this year, which is fine, but that's coming up pretty quickly. And as part of the agreement, it also says the city would complete all the site clearance work before that property is sold. And so that would require the city to have all the building demolition completed, as well as the slab and basement foundation of the buildings removed before that date. Due to several delays that have taken place as part of that project, we have not been able to get that work completed. So we're recommending a delay to that closing and modifying the agreement to allow that additional date. So instead of having it completed by December 31st, 2017, we're recommending March 31st, 2018 as the date on which the property would be sold to the developer. That would provide us adequate time to complete the necessary work. General Capital is in favor of that delay, and obviously it benefits the city to extend that date. So staff would recommend a modification. Any questions?
Questions, anyone?
I do have questions about the agreement. Okay. This is a question for the city attorney. Last time you told us that since it's a private project, there's no requirement for a performance bond. and that the question has come up to me from people, what happens if they acquire the property, they're building the project, and then they default, they can't continue? What happens as far as the $1 million property that was given to them for $1? What is the city's recourse? Does the city have a recourse, or is the city second in line, third in line, or fourth in line? So that was the question that I received from a number of people.
There's guaranteed payments that are obligated to begin to be made in 2019. Those annual payments are guaranteed by one of the principals of the developer personally. There is a deadline for starting and finishing the construction. If for some reason the construction was started and not finished, the developer would be in a predicament because they would be in breach of the development agreement. The city could sue the developer for breach of that agreement. This developer, if he acquired the property, would be unable to sell the property without the city's permission. The developer would only be able to sell it with the city's permission, and the property would be subject to the obligation to perform the project as specified in the project documents. If the developer went under, I guess I want to sort of general comments about the process for approving this project is that with the financing that the developer is obtaining, there's quite a bit of scrutiny given to the cost projections and the income projections from the lenders that the developer was getting money from. And so I think we have an added level of security there or comfort in that the project has been scrutinized by these outside lenders and has been determined to be feasible. So they're not going to loan their money for this unless they're confident that it's going to go through. The city will have sold the property to the developer. If the work has not begun by the deadline, then the city could sue the developer for failure to start and could ask for the developer to be ordered by a court to specifically perform the obligation. I think we're going to know for certain as to the developer's financial ability to perform in the next couple months. I think there's, and Joe can Joe has more information about this than I, but there's a part of the financing package that is going to be approved or solidified in the next month or two. Is that right, Joe?
Yeah, and part of the reason for the extension to the end of March was for their lenders as part of their due diligence. They said they would basically need a minimum of 60 days prior to closing where they have everything aligned as far as the financing and other. So they're going to know well ahead of that closing date if there's issues with their financing. So we should find out at the middle of January.
The December 12th public hearing, is that on Community Development Block Grant? Is that funding going to them? Could you explain that?
The public hearing that we have, will have in December, is a requirement of the city receiving a Community Development Block Grant. Hold public hearings basically before we apply for the grant at the beginning of the project, and then at the end of the project. That's a requirement of the city obtaining the grant. But technically those grant funds went to the city to help cover the cost of the property acquisition. Those grant dollars are not going to.
They cover roughly, what, $495,000 or something like that?
Right. Basically half of our acquisition cost.
Half of the cost, okay. Then another one, what about the demolition one? Is that part of it too?
that is not part of that requirement for the public hearing, but there was a site assessment grant which we received from the WEDC, which covered the costs, or part of the costs of the building demolition and the environmental analysis for the project.
I guess my last comment relates to what we talked about last time, and it's on page 13. And you referred to it here as far as learning whether or not they'll have enough funding. This is if they fail to buy the property. It says here, and I read this last time, notwithstanding the foregoing is injunctive relief, action for specific performance, and action for money damages. Then it says in the next sentence, notwithstanding the foregoing, the three things I listed, in no event may city exercise or seek any rights of injunction or specific performance for developers' failure to acquire the property. So in other words, as pointed out last time, we have no recourse if they don't sign. That's the idea I got from the letter of intent too. That they could walk away.
I think I don't know if you're trying to read more into it than what it says. I think it says it means just what it says. That if, for instance, if, as Joe has indicated, there's some key financing reassurances that are coming up soon, and let's say, we don't expect this to happen, but let's say that their financing all of a sudden would become unavailable. They didn't acquire this property. Well, we wouldn't have given them any money, and they would not be obligated to buy this property. And the notion that we, at that point, would want to force them to buy the property when we know that they don't have the financing to proceed with the project would be a questionable judgment to take, or step to take.
My next question is this the three items here, are these the usual things that are put into agreements? In other words, to give some impetus as far as making them follow through?
These are the three common remedies for breach of contract.
But they wanted to have this sentence in there as far as would not have any recourse.
With respect to, at the point of saying, we're here to buy this property, and they say, no, we're not going to go through with this project, we don't want this property,
okay,
then that's what that's for. And that way both parties would go their own way at that point. I want to add, we don't have any idea any reason to believe that that's going to happen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from any of the council members? All right, is there a motion regarding the development?
I make a motion we adopt the amendment to the development agreement. General capital.
Second.
Motion and a second.
Dahl?
Yes.
Westerby?
Yes.
Doss?
Yes.
Francis?
Yes.
Stockhausen?
Yes.
Killian?
Yes.
Nichols?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, that concludes the action items. We are going to go on to information and discussion. The first item is an ordinance amending the official traffic map downtown parking.
Yes. We had our November 14th work session, and these are most of the items that were talked about and as a consensus supported by the Common Council during that work session. The first item was reconfiguring the Mineral Street parking lot to an east-west orientation, decreasing conflict points, making 14 stalls eligible for the leased or assigned parking program along the Mineral Street side, and any stalls unleased and the remaining stalls in the slot would have the designation no parking 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. Just to make sure that everybody understands that part does not require an ordinance for the orientation or the assigned parking. Number 2 is consolidate the timed parking categories, making 2 timed parking designations. Anything less than 1 hour that are currently out there, the 5, 15, or 30-minute parking stalls, we will consolidate to 15-minute parking stalls. Anything that's over 1 or less than or equal to 4 hours would be designated as 3-hour parking, 9 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., and no parking 3 to 6 a.m. Third item is convert the parking on the west side of Bonson Street that's currently parking for city business only to 3-hour parking, no parking 3 to 6 a.m., similar to the rest of Main Street. There are 5 stalls that would be impacted by that. Convert the parking on the south side of East Mineral Street between 3rd and 4th Street from 4-hour parking to no parking 3 to 6 a.m. That's the on-street parking that would be directly adjacent to the Mineral Street parking lot, and it would make those stalls the same designation as what's in the parking lot. And the last item is converting the block of South Elm Street between West Pine and West Main Street to 3-hour parking, no parking 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. That's the block with the clinic, the hotel, the library. We would just make that similar to the parking restrictions on Main Street and the rest of downtown.
Questions? All right, we have some folks who have asked to speak about downtown parking. We'll start with your address and
Hi, I'm Dave Spenceley. My wife and I, Margie, own the bridal boutique on 40 East Main Street, Platteville. I'm proud to say for the last 37 years. And every time you want to talk about downtown parking and issues of long-term lease parking, we're here to chat. I know it's an informational meeting, but I wanted to speak to you what we thought. We've been up and down Main Street. There are other people that feel like we do. I'd like to talk about the lease parking and the configuration of the Mineral Street lot. Howard, one thing you said, the parking east to west you were going to change it to, that's what it is now. You're going to go north to south.
Okay.
You want to go north to south.
The stalls would be oriented north-south. My intent was that the access driveway would be east-west.
Okay. All right, so that's what you want to change. I had met with Karen and Howard on different occasions, and we've had a little discussion about this, and they know how we feel about the long-term lease parking. There are now 50 stalls that are eligible for lease parking, which when we met with Karen not long ago, there were only 22 of those rented. So I don't understand why we would put 14 more on the agenda if we don't have half leased out, what we have already named, and signed. So a lot of those stalls are sitting empty 24 hours a day, 365 days of the year, 28 of them, with signs that say you can't park here without a permit. That seems senseless to me. We should have marked the signs, the stalls, excuse me, as we needed them, and mark 3 or 4 at a time as we get the leases signed. And I think some of those signs should be taken down. There's 2 lots to the north behind the police station that could easily be moved into one, and the other lot would be eligible for anybody to park. Sign it how you like. Long-term parking and downtown retail just don't belong in the same sentence to me. We need parking that people can come in and get their shopping done, move up and down Main Street, employees that work park behind there. If you want to have 24-hour parking, you need some of that. But in that 24-hour parking, you have the person living there that parks there at night, and when they leave in the morning, the bridal boutique employee can be there during the day. They leave at 6 o'clock at night, and the long-term parker pulls in and parks overnight again. That makes perfect sense to me. Marking the 14 more stalls really does seem senseless to me, and I really think we should look at some of them that are marked and reducing the ones that we have if we don't have them rented. A couple of the articles in the Platteville Journal. Starting in October, Director of Public Works Howard Crowfoot said the student group found that people are wanting and waiting for overnight parking. Right now, about 50 overnight stalls can be leased for $30 a month on a 12-month lease. But there are way more than 50 people who work, live, and shop downtown, he said. I don't totally understand that, because if they were waiting, they would have them leased. Another thing in that article, that the group recommended that we convert the 24-hour parking stalls in the Mineral Street, Post Office, and Oak Streets to lease parking. There again, the 24-hour seems to work. I don't know why we just don't leave that alone. The 24-hour is a great tool for the downtown people that live and work out of the city. Then we had another article that came out after we did the surveys, the survey response. And despite considerable opposition to several proposals, as expressed in public comments posted on the city's website, the city received about 20 responses from 300 notices sent to users of downtown parking about the proposed changes. Wait a minute, let me check this. Okay. Here it is here. Consensus of the council, however, agreed to go ahead with the proposal, including expanding lease parking in what are now 24-hour stalls on the Oak Street, Mineral Street, and Post Office, despite almost unanimous opposition from the public comments. Now, to me, if you have that much opposition to it, why are we going forward with it? We don't want lease parking in our downtown business area, limiting our shoppers' parking, wrote one comment, who added, wanting to see empty spots that are leased that can't be used when the leaser is gone. Lease parking changes public parking to private, wrote another. It makes downtown parking worse, and the city knows this. As far as the configuration of the lot, behind Deb's Fashion to Fit, when you come in with two different aisles there, you're really bottlenecking a lot of stalls right there in that southwest corner. It's going to be tough stalls to get into. Now, we did talk, she talked about going from 10 foot down to 9 foot. It sounds like we might have a compromise of 9.5 foot. But it really creates a bottleneck the way we're laying it out versus what we have now. And I know there's some concern about those 11 stalls backing out onto the street, on 3rd Street. But it's been safe for years. Everyone has to back their car out of their garage in the morning and back it onto the street. I just don't see why this is such a safety issue when you go out to Walmart and everybody's backing up every direction. Now there's a safety issue. I just don't see that 3rd Street is that busy that we don't use 3rd Street as one of our aisles for making that parking lot even more accessible and easier to park in. By using the street as one of your aisles, you've gained a lot of space on that lot to the tune of 20 feet. And I just don't see where those 11 stalls have an issue. And I think if you look in the accident reports, you won't find much, because we've been looking out that back door a lot of years. The lease stalls, one more time, and then I'll be done. They say is a new revenue stream. Well, if they get all 50 stalls leased at $360 a year, it's to the tune of $18,000. In this multi-million-dollar budget we're dealing with, do we really want to mess with our downtown retail parking situation by taking 50 stalls so we can have $18,000? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We also had Mark Ein.
Mark Ein. I've owned property in the downtown for 25 years, and I just want to comment, I guess, on not so much on the geography as the concept. I say stop the lease or paid public parking. I mean, what part of public don't you understand? I looked in the dictionary. Public, it has a Latin derivation. It says of belonging to or concerning the people as a whole of the community at large. And number 2 was for the use and benefit of all, as in public building. So, I mean, what's next? We're going to rent chairs to kids at the public library, or we're going to start renting picnic tables to people that are going on a picnic. And the second concept is the 3 to 5 a.m. rule is unmanageable for residents in the downtown. I mean, what are they going to do? Get up at 3 a.m. and move their car so that they can go back to bed? I mean, this policy will lead to whole blocks being vacant, just like they were when I got started back in 1991. That where Helkers was, all but Helkers was, that whole block on both sides was empty. And these two policies are going to lead to more of that. It took 25 years to revitalize downtown, but with these policies, the paid public parking and the 3 to 6 a.m. no parking is going to have it overturned in 5 years. Thanks.
All right, those were the only 2 that have asked to speak on the downtown parking discussion. The next is Bailey Avenue.
Okay. We did this separately because it's on the south side of Pine Street. One of the things that we had discussed during our council work session was the possibility of designating certain blocks south of Pine Street as no overnight parking, and the Downtown Parking Task Force and the Common Council consensus was to submit for consideration designating Bailey Avenue from Pine Street to Mitchell Avenue as no parking 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. It is currently overnight parking. The no parking 3 to 6 a.m. would allow business customers and other residential parking to take place on this block, and restrict overnight parking, directing them to the leased or assigned parking stalls.
I guess I would just add, at the last Downtown Parking Task Force meeting, they ultimately deferred this to the council because it was outside of the scope of their
Questions on the Bailey Avenue discussion?
Yes, three streets were brought to us. We're only looking at Bailey. So I asked about South Court. Have you investigated South Court? Because there's parking only on one side of the street. I find about 10, 11 cars along that street. So how is that street going to be handled?
We did not begin any
aren't you-
investigation at this time.
Why aren't you bringing that together with Bailey? And I think is some commonality here. That's one question, so you have not investigated yet. What about why is Rountree Avenue left off as far as consideration? Rountree Avenue between Pine Street and Mitchell has paid parking and free parking. And then the other side next to Rountree House has street parking there. So what are you going to do about the street parking next to Rountree House? Recommendation on that?
Initially started off with the scope of the downtown parking task force. We did some additional study on Bailey Avenue based on specific resident complaints, and actually, you in particular, Councilmember Ken, were requesting that we take a look at that and bring that forward. We did, in addition, discuss Court and Rountree. Because we thought that changing the Pine Street lot to lease parking might have an impact there, and we wanted to make you aware that there could be some impact there. But then based on the council's feedback from the work session, we came back with just Bailey.
Well, it's been presented to the council that there are people on Bailey that would like to have permit parking on Bailey. As most of you remember, the initial parking was to be permit parking on Bailey between Mitchell and Pine Street. And so now it's become, besides business customers, which some people say is not true, and friends of residents, it has become more so parking for residents of the downtown. So I pointed this out before, and neighbors have pointed out that those people on Bailey, owning on Bailey, are having to pay the penalty as far as providing parking for the residents of downtown. I don't think that's fair. When people can't have parking from guests at their front door, I don't think it's a fairness at all. We need to be helpful to the residents of Platteville as far as those that are owning private property, and besides considering the rentals, we need to also consider the homeowners, and homeowners are not being considered here.
And I understand what you're saying. I also had people call me. I have some suggestions that we might be able to do, but at this time it might not be appropriate to do it. So I just wanted to let people know that I've been contacted too.
Other comments?
The question is why is the parking, why was it changed from permit parking way back when we instituted permit parking? Why was it changed from permit parking to free parking?
I think Ken,
those streets.
Yeah, Ken, in our work session, I think the fact was brought up that permit parking is only for concerns in Bailey is that there are two businesses that also not front, but have access to Bailey. And so we would, customer, you could not come and park on the street either if you did not have a permit. That was one of our concerns.
I recommended that you split up the street. That is not difficult to do. The police have enough intelligence that they can check that parking if, say, the parking were split. Part permit parking and part of it being parking that's free parking.
And as you recall, we did discuss that with the
That is
police.
doable.
We did discuss that with the police department, and they said that they could see that a lot of issues with trying to split a street. Now, I understand you don't agree with that, and I understand we've had this discussion before. Anything else to add about this subject?
Well, I'm trying to find a solution to this situation here and help the people.
Right. Anybody else have any comments? Right. That's Bailey Avenue. The next one is Pioneer Road.
Okay. Citizens on Pioneer Road have had concerns regarding commuter and overnight parking on Pioneer Road, south of Southwest Road. Staff conducted a survey, and it appears that during the week that commuters and overnight parking fill the street from Southwest Road nearly to the first driveway of residents on Pioneer Road. On weekends, the parking is significantly reduced. Citizen concerns include late night or overnight parking with noise and littering, and there are also concerns about Pioneer Road being used as a commuter route with increased traffic and excessive vehicle speeds. And residents are concerned about the effect on safety of children in the neighborhood and property values. We looked at Ready Drive coming off of Chestnut Street near Rountree Commons. There were concerns, but there were other issues, and the Common Council did approve no parking 3 to 6 a.m. on Ready Drive from Chestnut Street to Cadillac Drive. One of the comments was it would be nice to see a similar restriction for Pioneer Road, so staff is proposing an ordinance to make Pioneer Road from Southwest Road to Vinegar Hill Road as no overnight parking or no parking 3 to 6 a.m. In your packet is a letter from a resident at 605 Pioneer Road regarding this issue.
Right. We have a number of people have asked to speak on this in interest of time. If you all have the same view, you can make your comments short. That would be appreciated. But again, you know, we're not going to cut you off. But, you know, I think in view of the fact that all except one have said against, I think that, and I'm not sure that one was really in favor, but we're going to start with Tom Scoop. You know, Tom, I'm not going to cut you off, but I mean, realistically, if everyone's going to say the same thing, we hear the message.
My biggest concern is that when...
Tom, you live on?
630 Pioneer Road. It's about the fourth house on the left side going up. My biggest concern is when you folks decide whatever you decide, have you gone out there to see the situation? Have you gone out there to see the situation in the winter? That road where they're parking on both sides is tough when there's no cars there. It's probably the steepest hill in town. It's certainly the windiest steep road in town, and it's also a north-facing road. That road, unless there's weather conditions that would dry off most roads, there's snow and ice on it. There's usually some trails that you try to get up there. So when there's cars parked on one side or both sides, and we happen to get some snow flurries, I don't know if the city can be sued for allowing parking in a situation where as you weave down that road, I've done it many times, you slide a little bit. And when you try to brake a little bit, you slide a little bit. And with cars on both sides, it's not a wise thing. So none of my thoughts even have anything to do with other people's comments that were wrote to you. When you if there's no parking restrictions, and I would say the 3 to 6, I'm not worried about the 3 to 6. I'm worried about the 6 to 3 when there's cars parked on both sides. And it's just really increased in the last year. It used to be they would be on one side, but then there was confusion because alternate side parking was even and odd, but when the city assigned the numbers on Pioneer Road, they flip-flopped them. So the even numbers are on the left or east side of the road, and they should be on the west side. So there were cars then interpreting differently and ending up parking on both sides. There's a gentleman that lives on the street down there that would probably be happy if the cars stayed there because it would save his mailbox as the cars come down and wipe out his mailbox on a pretty much annual basis. If there's a car there, it'll probably save his mailbox. But there's going to be a lot of collisions as people slide in the winter. That's my basic thoughts. Yes?
Alternate side parking?
Well, I think the community has alternate side parking.
Yes.
On one side, November 15th.
And another thing when...
just a minute. Howard, could you clarify, is alternate side parking also during the day?
No.
That's what I thought. Alternate side parking only applies to overnight parking. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So anytime during the day, it could be parked both sides because there is no alternate side parking during the day.
Correct.
I just wanted to clarify that. It's 15th of November. I don't know.
When does the alternate side parking start? What's the hour?
Enforcement starts at 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. for alternate side.
School boat.
See, what happens is by the time a lot of the commuters come in, and I understand they're in a situation where they need a place to park, but when they come in and there's 3 or 4 inches of snow there have been times where I try to get up the hill and I don't quite manage to get all the way, and there's going to be people who are sliding backwards into cars parked on that road. And this is a road that, as you're coming down, it makes a pretty good left-hand turn as it starts the steepest section. Then it straightens out a little bit, going down, and then toward the bottom, you have the veering into Southwest Road. And so you have to, it's not just a straight little downhill. It's a weaving pattern. And in the winter, I go the other way. I go to the south. I've learned, but there's going to be plenty of people who are coming from the south that are not going to be prepared for all the cars parked there.
Right.
Thank you.
Steve Chandler.
Steve Chandler, 680 Pioneer Road. And again, the problems as I see it are the dangerous driving. The speed is increased. Part of the reason the cars are parking there, according to the students that I've talked to, is some of the increased development on the university property, taking away some of their driving stalls, particularly along the behind the PAC Center. But it's gotten extremely bad this year, where last year it was single lane. Now it's both sides of the road. Again, cars speed down the hill. As a commuter, as we've said, they often speed up the hill, trying to drive and get, as they're going around the corner that Tom talked about. They go on the center, not staying to the corners. Car doors opening create dangers for drivers. The service vehicles often take the center of the track because there's nowhere else to go. Parkers end up turning around in my driveway when they think I'm not home and not watching. They're careful to try to do a Y-turn otherwise. Again, it increases wear on my driveway and becomes a safety issue. And it's a safety concern for me because, again, they're looking at my house, looking at my driveway, parking lot, etc. And this comes out to 10 to 20 turnarounds per day. So again, the bottom of my driveway gets that increased wear on it. Again, there's also senior housing at the top of the development, and again, a safety issue for some of those older drivers, including myself. The litter has greatly increased this year. So far, a tire has been removed. I made a repeated request to have garbage picked up. Most of it's from fast food joints. And otherwise, neighbors had picked it up if it was an occasional thing, but that shouldn't be our job. If you look at the bottom by the stop sign, there's all kinds of litter placed there. And again, for 17 years that I've lived there, it hasn't been a problem before. There's used latex gloves have been left there, again, for safety issues, and whether it's a biohazard, no one's been willing to pick that up, and it still remains there. A bike's been dumped, or I'm assuming a student is still using that as transportation back and from school, but it's dumped into the weeds, you know, and whether it's picked up on a daily basis or weekly basis, I'm not sure. We take pride in our property, and besides the pollution problem with that, it becomes an eyesore, brings unwanted pests, which lowers our property value. I'm not sure about the 3 to 6 a.m. if that's going to cause any solution. Right now, it just causes me extra grief. Because car alarms go off at all hour of night, and I hear those alarms. So the times don't seem to matter. The drivers come in at 2 o'clock at bar time or whenever. And again, as students, they're probably up at those times. I'm not. Again, safety becomes an issue because there's no lights down there. So again, if I had a son or daughter on a poorly lit road at 2 o'clock in the morning walking back to a dorm or some other location, I would be concerned. And again, it's not lit down there. There's woods on either side. The 3 to 6 does not do anything to reduce the safety and traffic issue. The cars are parked there during the day, as we've said. Winter becomes an increasingly dangerous problem. You know, again, I'm right down there at the bottom, so I see the problems. There's cars that are pulling off. They come up to my driveway, ask if they can borrow salt or sand to help them get up. So I don't know if that can be solved or not. And again, the city crews haven't also been able to do their job, so my community services have been reduced. There's been leaves and brush at neighbors' properties that haven't been able to been removed because of the cars being parked there. And I guess that could probably be solved if the landscaping companies at my neighbors would put it in their driveway, since they're gone right now, but that hasn't happened. So those leaves are there, they blow over and create more work for me. I also have to haul my leaves and brush since there's cars parked in front of my yard. Again, a few years ago we were told when this parking problem got to be an issue that it wasn't going to be a problem, that Pioneer Road wasn't going to be used for student parking, but now it is. And I'm not sure where the breakdown happened, but it's disheartening. Again, I hope there's a formula that we can work with the city and the university together to provide parking for the students. I don't know if permit parking is a problem and why that isn't implemented there to reduce the parking. At the very least, it should be single-side parking for the safety of all the residents here. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom Loringer?
Tom Lowinger, 610 Pioneer Road. I'm farther up the hill, closer to Vinegar Hill. There's no doubt there's a problem, and it's changing from year, like they say, a year ago it wasn't so bad. My concern is, where I'm at, is to lose the 3 to 6 parking at night. I don't use it regularly. Sometimes I might have a trailer on a truck, so it's nice to be able to park in the street. Family comes home. Our house is fairly close to the road. There's not necessarily room in the driveway for vehicles. We don't do it regularly. Where Chandlers are, they definitely have a problem. Sitting there listening to people, snow's definitely a problem. I go by the university, some of those curbs are painted yellow. Maybe paint yellow up the hill, up to about Chandlers. And maybe some of this is going to be trial and error. If it's painted yellow up the hill so far, do they adapt and come farther up the hill? So can we make a decision? We can make a decision, but does it have to be finalized this year, or can it be revisited? I just noticed we're talking about alternate side parking. I believe they probably didn't start enforcing that until last night, because it was parked way up past the corner last night. On the other side of the road, they all had $20 tickets last night. Tonight, that road's half empty. The other thing is, to make it a year-long no parking 3 to 6, it's not a problem in the summer because school isn't on. If alternate side corrects some of it, I don't think it will, but maybe it doesn't, or maybe we could only go halfway up the hill and put a sign that says no parking from Southwest Road up past the corner. Maybe that would alleviate it, and some of us that are farther up the hill would still be able to utilize parking. Those are some of my thoughts. Thank you.
Carly Anderson.
Carly Anderson, 625 Pioneer Road. And I know I was at the city council meeting November 14th, so I know all of you already know my concerns, as many of them are listed in the notes. So just want to also remind everyone that there are also no sidewalks in our subdivision. So from a safety perspective of in the winter time, and as a mom of 3 young children, they're outside all the time, whether it's on their scooters or bikes. We don't have sidewalks anywhere in our subdivision. So that's the biggest thing for me, with all the other things that people have talked about and I've already discussed at the last meeting. I also just want you to consider, so I know you guys visited the Ready Street parking regulations. And for me, I've only lived in Platteville for 1.5 years, but the parking on Ready isn't the same as the people who are going to be parking on Ready, or if they ever would, probably aren't the same people who are parking on our street. So our proximity to campus is why people are parking on our street. So I don't feel that the regulations on Ready are necessarily would apply, I think, to our street, and my neighbors can chime in. So we're just in proximity a lot closer to campus buildings and the engineering buildings for commuters, staff, and students to park. So just some other considerations or things that I would ask you guys to think about and consider. 2-hour parking limit. And then I know we've talked about the no 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. parking, but then overnight parking permits for residents. So residents that live in the subdivision and in our neighborhood, we would have parking permits for guests who visit us during the holidays. Or hey, I have a birthday party, or I have a bunch of family members over and they're gonna all spend the night or spend the weekend. So just some other considerations that I wanted to put out there of things to think about. I just don't feel like the 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. only is the right answer as well. So that's really all I had.
Chuck Rundy?
Chuck Rundy, 615 Pioneer Road. My issues have already been discussed, so I won't get back into that again. But I would like to preface my comments with the fact that I've been on committees that has discussed parking in Platteville, downtown, ad nauseum. It's a no-win situation, folks. Not everyone's going to be happy. But my point I'd like to make in somewhat of a question that I have is I'm not familiar with whether or not there was an issue with parking on Ready Drive or not before the 3 to 6 ordinance was established. Was there ever an issue?
I believe that was done as part of the overall parking restrictions in the vicinity of Rountree Commons.
Okay.
People felt that was close enough to Rountree Commons that students would park on Ready Drive and walk to Rountree Commons.
Okay, makes sense. Makes sense. My thought was that the no parking 3 to 6 or no overnight parking seems to be working there. It might be a place to start on Pioneer Road. I know that's a proposal. We can start from there, and there's been several other suggestions made already this evening. If that doesn't work, go to the next one. So, thank you.
Thank you. Those are all the comments or people that have asked to make comments. So that includes Pioneer Road. So the next one is East Madison.
Okay, thank you. Mountain View Park on the north side of Madison Street from Broadway to the east city limits. There's currently no curb and gutter, and there are no parking restrictions on the street. When we have alternate side parking in the winter, vehicles will end up parking on that north side. They end up parking in those grassy areas that become rutted and cause concerns for staff in the spring. Similarly, whenever the ground is saturated in the spring or other places, any parking on that side of the street would cause rutting. We're looking to propose an ordinance, designate no parking this side of street from Broadway. Initially, I had proposed east city limits. Subsequent to this going into the packet, there have been discussions about possibly pulling that back so that it would be from Broadway to Lincoln Street only. What we have are some of the residents on the south side of that one block that have a number of vehicles. They park in the driveway and they also park on the street. They just want to make sure that they be good neighbors. They want to follow the rules. if they follow the rules and park on the opposite side of the street, then my guys get upset with them because they end up having to fill in the ruts and take care of the ruts in the spring. If they don't park on the other side of the street, then they get tickets for violating no alternate side parking rules. So they just would like to have some guidance, and we feel that this would be the best thing for them.
Questions, anyone?
We have any information that we would ever put curb and gutter? I mean, I understand there is no curb and gutter on that side of the street. Now, I don't know when that street was constructed. I don't know much about it. But the question I have is, what is the opportunity for getting curb and gutter on that street? I mean, this is, in my opinion, a temporary solution at best, because when people come, I mean, not only those residents, it's going to be other people who come to the park who park there, and you're still going to have ruts and you're still going to have problems.
At this time, it is not in the 5-year CIP window, so any solution that we're looking at would be at least a 5-year solution, probably a lot longer.
Was that discussed? Remember when the street was reconfigured there between Broadway and East?
Yeah, Broadway was reconstructed all the way. Yeah.
Yes,
Broadway was reconstructed.
Extend.
We do
some
have
of that improvement there.
We do have curb on the north side where the intersection was reconfigured, but that's it. It stops just a little ways back because it wasn't part of that project.
Other questions? Right. Next is the ADA paratransit plan.
Okay. City of Platteville has a fixed route bus service, and as part of that, DOT requirements include having an ADA complementary paratransit plan. And so we have that plan, and we've enclosed the final draft. We're looking at doing a formal public hearing at next council meeting to ensure full public comment. The thought pattern is that in large cities you have the normal fixed route bus system, and you have for-hire non-subsidized taxi cabs. So what they're looking for is they're looking for an alternative for disabled individuals to be able to use public transit like in those large cities. We have our shared ride taxi. So in essence, what's happening is our shared ride taxi becomes the ADA paratransit system for us. So this is a boilerplate. We put in our City of Platteville where it says municipality, and we go for it. The biggest thing is that it creates additional reporting and tracking requirements for our shared ride taxi / ADA paratransit, and that's one of the reasons why we had to rebid that service. So my recommendation is that the council approve a motion to adopt the complementary paratransit plan.
Howard, when you say they, you mean the Wisconsin Department of Transportation and
Wisconsin DOT and Federal Transit Authority require a paratransit plan.
That's because we do receive funding from both of those entities for our taxi and our bus service, correct?
That's correct.
Any questions on the complimentary paratransit plan? All right.
You said this is actually just a plan, that the only change that's been made from the standard plan is to insert our name.
Yes.
All right. And to continue on with the paratransit, there's the taxi.
Our taxi service is contract 18-17A. We had one proposal. We've had our evaluation committee reviewed the qualitative merits, and then they are recommending approval of the ADA taxi service. The cost for this service, partially because of the ADA paratransit requirements, has gone up over the 2017 price. But what we would be doing is we would be locking ourselves into a 2-year contract with option years, so desired.
Questions?
Howard, those option years, is there an escalator clause in it?
Correct. The price is fixed for the first 2 years, the lock-in portion, and then there's a consumer price index escalator for option years, for the each option year.
Any other comments or questions? All right, then contract 1718B for the fixed route for the bus.
Okay, so similarly, we have one proposal for the bus. In this case, if it's accepted, the hourly cost is actually going to decrease. That will offset most of the proposed increase in the taxi contract. Similarly, we would be locked in for a 2-year contract and have the 3 option years with the escalator clause. We did have a variant on this that should the city work with the university and purchase buses similar to the way we purchase taxi vehicles, it would be the same process, same procedures. The contract would look at reducing the hourly cost of the bus service for depending on how many buses the city/university acquire. And looking at that, we would have a payback period of between 2 and 3.5 years, depending on how many buses we provide to pay back the local match.
Questions? And Howard, how much would we then have for depreciation for bus replacement? I mean, there's the cost of the bus, but there's also the fact that the bus wears out and has to be replaced.
That's correct.
So how much would be available to put in a sinking fund or some other kind of fund that would then provide the next bus at virtually no cost?
We could look at including something like that for the local match portion. When we do these, we normally get capital grants to replace buses or taxis with 80% federal funding and 20% local match. We have not done a sinking fund, but if the council wishes, we could look at doing that.
I understand that that has been the option that's been available, the 80-20. I don't know, you know, when you project into the future, my concern about owning the vehicles is that eventually they have to be replaced. And those become big CIP items at the time that they have to be replaced.
I would just
Questions or
note in
comments?
the 2018 CIP, you have a bus in it, but the bus is proposed to be paid for through the grant that Howard mentioned and a UWP match, not a city match. So even though the bus is technically the city's because the transit system is managed by the city, there would actually be no city funds that would go toward.
Right. Any other comments or questions? We are going to go off camera and go into a work session, the future of the senior center building. Thanks.